Yes.
Okay. Let's call the meeting to order and start with the roll call. Steve, can we start on your end?
Eglash present.
Ballantyne present.
Foster here.
Hall present.
Cook here.
Okay, oral communications, I don't have any cards, so I'm going to assume oral communications on issues not on the agenda. So oral communications on subject. Right, so in other words, this is the moment where we do oral communications on anything not on the agenda. No card. Cards are on the podium? Got it. Thank you, Jeff. Okay. Approval of the minutes. Any comments? Oh, yes, Director Fong, you have input on the minutes. We all have input on the minutes.
This is an agenda item, so you're okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Foster. I think you perhaps all received an email from Herb Borak identifying some corrections that we needed to make to the minutes. I'll read them into the record. It's for page 7 of 11. The paragraph beginning Herb Borak recognized, which is the second full paragraph. Should be. Herb Borak recognized the importance of data and is glad, and then under the next line should read that in this report is a recognition that the city should be doing data while getting video and telephone, quote, over the top, quote. And then the paragraph continues, he does not agree with CTC's recommendation to provide active Ethernet to small businesses. Instead, it should be targeting homes, and then adds providing active Ethernet to small businesses, then the paragraph continues, may cannibalize existing value-added resellers currently licensing dark fiber from the city. Google hired CTC to conduct a study on streamlining cities' processes. Herb does not agree with the partnership model. The city should please add the word not, use the fiber fund to pay for drop cables, and then add, and customer premises equipment. Customers can pay for home connections. Active Ethernet is better than GPON for residents. A wireless survey was recently conducted and less than 10% of respondents thought it was important for the city to provide Wi-Fi service. Please add at local parks. And with those changes, staff recommends adoption of the minutes.
Any other comments or suggested changes? Okay, then let's have a motion to approve the minutes as revised.
I move that we approve the minutes as revised.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Next up is agenda review and revisions. I'm guessing tonight we're okay. Director Fong, any changes? We're all good. Reports from commissioner meetings and events. Commissioner Schwartz, we always count on you for this.
Hi. So I had put together the program for Smart Cities Week, which was in DC now it seems like such a long time ago, in September. And what was interesting, I didn't actually get to sit in any sessions because I was running everything and making it short move, but I did tape ones that I thought would be relevant for our group. So I will make those available if anybody would like to hear them. But sort of a general impression that I got is that we really are in the middle of a lot of things that have been happening, and the utility advances that have happened at various utilities are forming the basis for a lot of the Internet of Things advances that are happening in different cities. And so there are a lot of cities that not only can we learn from their experiences, but I think that we can partner with cities in our region. And I found that when I was talking to people who were from other communities in our area, that they'd be very delighted to work with us. And so I'm going to follow up with sort of staff and kind of make some introductions, because I think we can help each other in this. And I think, and the other part that I just want to say from this event was how exciting it was to see that the technology in this area was really something that was going to kickstart a lot of things that had to do with equity and how sort of not only kind of the technological advances that communities can make, but tying to economic mobility and vitality for all populations. So it really has a lot, I think, that we can be part of something that's a movement that's really exciting. So that's my impression from the event.
Great, thank you for that, Commissioner Schwartz. And I'll take this moment to thank you as well for being here on your birthday. Happy birthday. Showing incredible commitment to the UAC.
Are you going to lead us in a song, Chair Foster?
That thought crossed my mind, but I think we'll pass on
Chair
that.
Foster, if
Yes.
I could just, first off, happy birthday. If you have things that you would like to share with the other commissioners, if you send them to me, I can make sure it's available to the rest of the commission, just to avoid any Brown Act violations.
Right, no, I know I'm not allowed to send it myself, so yes, I will be sending it through you.
Speaking of which, Gil Friend, speaking of events, Chief Sustainability Officer Gil Friend asked if anyone on the UAC will be attending the upcoming, Jane Val, help me out, it's the Silicon Valley, what's the upcoming conference? It's in the next week or two, Sustainability Conference. Anyone, everyone? Oh, is it Future of Utilities? Shoot, oh, I don't have it. Anyway, it doesn't sound like anyone is attending a Silicon Valley event. It's local. All right, anyway, that's fine. All right, next up, Director of Utilities report.
Thank you very much. I have a quick report. You may or may not know that actually City of Palo Alto employees did participate in aid to fire victims or at least to do some restoration, fire suppression and restoration. So last month, we dispatched an electric utility crew to the Northern California wildland fire. This is the Valley Fire, to assist with fire restoration efforts at NCPA and other geothermal facilities. You may or may not also know that fire crews were also deployed for aid to both the Butte Fire and the Valley Fire. And we definitely thank all those who volunteered for their service. Drought update, we'll be providing a full drought update later tonight. And I'll apologize in advance. I have to leave at about 8:45, just, but Jane will, Jane will stay. Tree care during the drought. The city is working with Canopy and others in the community to inform customers about the city's efforts to increase public and street tree watering, as well as to encourage people to continue watering their own trees. There are great resources that can be found on the website at cityofpaloalto.org/water. On the marketing front, Palo Alto Green Gas, which is also a topic for discussion later tonight, we have close to 950 customers who are now enrolled in our voluntary natural gas carbon emissions offset program. And then we've spoken before about Peninsula Sun Shares. This was what we call group buy program for solar panels throughout the Bay Area. Almost 1,100 community members registered for the solar group buy program. The potential renewable energy capacity is approximately equivalent to the carbon sequestered by over 13,000 acres of forest in 1 year. It's also the annual greenhouse gas emissions from more than 3,400 passenger vehicles. Palo Alto made up about 28% of the total program participation, with 294 residents requesting proposals, and of those, 54 signed contracts for a total solar capacity of 236 kilowatts. In your packet, we have the utilities quarterly report, which is the final quarterly report for fiscal year 2015. It includes operational reliability measures as well as financial summaries for the fiscal year. It's a great read. The quarterly report, and we actually know Chair Foster reads it.
Verbatim.
And Commissioner Hall also reads it. Thank you both very much. And I'm not trying to out anybody for not reading it. I'm just acknowledging those who have asked us many questions as a result of it. The quarterly report also provides an update on state legislation as of the end of the 2015 legislative session. Many of the bills that passed are either now awaiting or have just been signed by the governor. And then I think another standing item we've got in our report is events, workshops, and speaking engagements. Staff provided several presentations this past month about drought conditions and water resources to businesses, residents, and college students. The city hosted 2 workshops on water-efficient landscaping during a drought, rainwater, and gray water reuse. 2 additional landscape workshops are scheduled for October, including one this Saturday, and a hands-on planting event at City Hall later in the month. Again, if you go to our website, cityofpaloalto.org, in this case, it's cityofpaloalto.org/workshops. You can find out more information on those. That concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Questions, comments? Okay, moving on. I do not believe we have any unfinished business. And so with that, we are moving on to new business. First item is update on the implementation of the local solar plan and recommendation and the PV Partners program, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you very much. We have Resource Planner Amy Bailey, who's going to give us a short presentation, which should summarize the memo.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. So this presentation is kind of the highlight reel of the memo you have on the update for the implementation of the local solar plan and also a recommendation regarding PV Partners. This in specific is the action we're talking about. PV Partners is the rebate program for customer-sited solar photovoltaic systems. We're requesting the UAC recommend that the council let the program sunset once we've achieved all of our legislative mandates set forth in the Million Solar Roofs Bill. Okay. The local solar plan was adopted on Earth Day of last year by council, and the overarching goal of the plan is to achieve 4% of the city's energy needs by 2023. And that's up from 0.7% whenever the plan was passed last year. There were 3 programmatic initiatives identified in the plan: the Solar Group Buy program, a community solar program, and also a solar donation program for staff research and development. But more broadly, there were a variety of strategies that were identified to help facilitate the deployment of local solar, some of which are included here. And it's very much an interdepartmental effort. Many of these activities are related to permitting, so there's a lot of collaboration with the Development Center, for instance. Okay. There have been a number of achievements to date in implementing the plan. If you look at attachment B, that's a full matrix summary of what we've achieved and also kind of the near-term implementation plans. And here are a few of the achievements. We completed a LiDAR-based solar technical potential assessment, published it online. We participated in the Peninsula Sunshires program, which you heard was very successful. We expanded CLEAN to include a different contract year option, a 25-year term option, et cetera. So here's a chart that kind of shows you how much solar has been installed in Palo Alto annually to date. And so this is, well, cumulative capacity graph and also number of systems. So the line is the system count measured on the left axis, and the bars are the capacity on the right. And one note, the last datum, the 2015 install capacity, that's only through August of 2015. And so we still have capacity that's installed this calendar year. Here's a tentative timeline of some of the near-term implementation efforts. This is also in the summary table in attachment B. So there's a lot in the pipeline, including net energy metering, the successor program development, design guidelines for that, which will be coming to you soon. Okay, so on to PV Partners. The program was established in 1999 to provide rebates for customer-sited solar PV systems, and it's open to all of our customer classes. There were certain buckets designated for specific customer classes. In 2006, the program was expanded substantially to comply with the Million Solar Roofs bill. The budget was increased by $13 million, and that's to achieve the goal of deploying 6.5 megawatts by 2017. And below is a summary table that shows you the PV Partners program kind of capacity, including that which was installed prior to SB1, that which was installed during SB1, pending and reserved capacity, unreserved capacity. So as you can see by the numbers, it's been a very successful program. The city has won a lot of awards for this program. Okay, so recently, of August of last year, all of the residential rebate funds were fully reserved. In March of this year, in the context of the CLEAN program, the Finance Committee had directed staff to return to them to identify options for continuing the PV Partners program for residential rebates in specific, so that's why we're here today. Also, more recently in September, all of the large commercial rebate funds were fully reserved, so we only have around $500,000 left, and that's for customers that are served by the E2 and E4 rates. So the recommendation is to let the program sunset as we had planned once the legislative requirements have been met that were set forth in SB1. And these are the primary reasons. First, the goals of the state legislation will have been achieved. We're certainly on track to meet our Palo Alto's allocation of the statewide goal, our allocation being the 6.5 megawatts. The objective of lowering the cost of solar can be achieved in many other ways. The PV Partners program has quite high administrative costs, and also making rebate funds available again to residential customers would result in quite disruptive market dynamics and messaging.
You just, where you say they're going to be achieved in other ways, what are those other ways?
For instance, the Solar Group Buy program. So the objective of lowering the cost of solar, actually this is the perfect question to lead into this graph. So here's the average system cost that has been installed through PV Partners. This is both pre-SB1 and then also during SB1. So as you can see, the blue solid line is the system price, the average annual system price after rebates. The dashed line is pre-rebate. And the diamond there is the base price for a solar system through the Peninsula SunShares program. So the system costs are substantially lower than the rebated systems without subsidies and lower administration costs.
And so then, have you done a projection of what happens in 2016 and on after those supports go away?
After the ITC sunsets. So we had mentioned briefly in the key, okay, the investment tax credit, the federal investment tax credit is currently 30% for both commercial and homeowner-owned systems, individual-owned systems. At the end of 2016, for commercially owned systems, that will decrease to 10%, and for individually owned systems, that will go away. So if it is a third-party owned system for a residential system or a commercial system, there will still be some investment tax credit. But to your point, so we've completed the technical potential assessment in Palo Alto, and what we have underway is an economic and market potential assessment. And so the first cut of that assessment indicates that given the current investment tax schedule, investment tax credit schedule, given the current PV Partner program rebates we have, given the current NIM incentives and the cap on those incentives, we would be able to achieve, for instance, our local solar plan goal. So we are working on a kind of a more detailed assessment, but as far as the implications for meeting the local solar plan goal, the first cut at it says that we can. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It's okay, I'll wait for it to see the report that you do after you do your analysis. It's-
Okay. Actually, that's it as far as slides. Here's the recommendation again. Thanks very much for your attention.
Mike? Well, we'll start down the line. Mike, go ahead.
Hey, thank you for the good materials and very excellent presentation. I'm in favor of the most carbon reduction for the least cost, and that sounds like that's the philosophy that's guiding your recommendation here. So I fully support your recommendation.
So in your previous, like, I think it's back 2 slides, in the recent activity slide, one more. In March, yeah, there it is. In March, the Finance Committee requested the staff examine options for continuing the PV Partners rebate funds. So what came of that?
I'm sorry, so this is what became of that as far as our evaluation. This is effectively summarizing our evaluation and recommendation to actually not continue PV Partners.
So you didn't really come up with any options for continuing the PV Partners?
There are alternatives listed in the staff report, but as far as the staff recommendation, sure. So the alternatives are towards the end of the staff report. One alternative, for instance, of the remaining funds that are available for commercial, small and medium commercial customers served by E2 and E4. One option could be making those available for all customer classes. Another option could be actually adding funds from the general fund, and another option is adding funds from the electric fund specifically, and they would have different, legal implications. Sorry, it's on page 10.
Thanks. I hadn't caught that. Thanks so much. So in the next slide, the future of PV Partners, your recommendation is future is to just end it. There's no, like I just don't understand why it's called the future of PV Partners. It's just your recommendation. There's no future.
Sunset is, maybe sunset is a nicer way to describe it, but we do still have some rebate funds for commercial customers. We fully anticipate that those will be completely reserved by the end of the 10-year program, which is in 2017. And furthermore, some of the rebate funds are actually delivered over a 5-year time period for performance-based rebate. And so we will actually be administering it past 2020 because of the program structure. So there's a little bit of future there.
Okay, so ending it doesn't necessarily actually stop the spending on it, but it signals the end. The end is coming.
For residential rebates,
It's over.
had already been fully reserved as of last year, but yes, yeah.
So in the presentation, you don't really talk as much about the local solar plan in general. It's mostly about the PV Partners. In the report, it does talk more about the local solar plan. Were you intentionally not talking about the rest of the local solar in the presentation because it's going to come up later, or?
We have some backup slides if the commissioners would like to talk about any of the particular items. I mean, many of them are kind of updates. We certainly have
But the bottom line is, the rest of it is being pursued, the local solar plan. So it's just the PV Partners.
Sorry, we're not recommending any changes to the local solar plan.
Just ending the PV Partners program.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good evening. Thanks I can learn from you in terms of having on-point, very efficient presentations. I'm impressed. So, do you have a slide that goes along with table 2 in the staff report? A backup slide, you have that? If not, people can just turn to that table. Let me ask the question. So we're looking at targets for reaching 4% by 2023. The biggest amount of that is 9.7 of megawatts of currently unidentified programs. So I know that you don't know all the answers, and some of the other items on that table further up than the bottom line on that are things that you talked about at some length in the staff report. I was just wondering what your inkling is or what staff is thinking about. What would we do to achieve another 9.7 megawatts?
So just to clarify, that 9.7 is actually capacity that's not associated with any particular program, but more kind of naturally occurring install capacity, driven largely by, we did include one row that's anticipated capacity
Yes.
from the community solar and solar donation program, even though those, as you know, are under development and have not, gone through the review process yet. Based on the, again, first cut of the economic and market potential assessment, like this would be naturally occurring capacity, basically, like outside of any specific program.
So the market within the city would just, through its own devices, other than any rebates or any other programs, produce 9.7 megawatts over this time frame?
So we do have, some state mandates that, such as net energy metering, which, depending on what rate class you're in, is generally considered an incentive. So that's certainly incorporated in this, and we are embarking on an electric cost of service analysis that will be updating the electric rates. And as a part of that, one of the guidelines that was recently passed by council, the COSA design guidelines, is to assess the impact of the economics of solar, of changing those rate schedules. That's one of the many design guidelines. So I guess to answer your question, we have rates in place. We do have net energy metering, which has a specific cap set by the Public Utilities Code, which is an incentive. So there are some, I don't know if you want to call them programs, but we have price signals, basically, that are within our control.
Is there a statutory limit to how much net energy metering the city can accept?
There's Public Utilities Code 2827, I think, that says it has to be 5% of up to 5% of the aggregate customer peak demand. This is actually a clarification of our NIM cap is going to be going to council soon, and the net energy metering successor program design guidelines, which would be the terms and conditions for solar installed after that cap has been reached. Those design guidelines, which are kind of mimicking the COSA design guidelines, but our second subsidiary design guidelines, will be going to you this fall. So I think that would be a really good opportunity for a lot of discussion related to that.
So it sounds like at 5%, which is above the range we're talking about here, you've got plenty of room to go with if net energy metering takes off, there's plenty of room to go to meet the 9.7. There's no cap. The cap appears way above the 4% level, so plenty of room to go, right?
No,
Do I
so
misunderstand?
we're over 70% towards meeting the net energy metering cap at this point.
I see.
Amy, I think the 4% goal, you may be confusing.
Yes.
That's energy that would be generated of the city's total load. The 5% is 5% in capacity of the city's total peak load. And so we're mixing energy and capacity.
Okay, got it.
And so solar has a lot of capacity and not very much energy.
Okay.
And so the local solar plan has, I think, a capacity of maybe 12-ish%, the solar plan goal of 23 megawatts.
Yeah.
And that is 4% of the annual energy use of the city.
Okay.
Yeah, so our net metering cap is 9.5 megawatts. So.
Okay, my general comment is on that is not for immediate action, but I think, well, I would be interested in seeing some more granularity as you march on through the other implementations, the group buy, et cetera, and as that takes forward, and you start to see the trends set forth, then you'll have chance to calibrate on what's really happening in the city, and be able to come back to us at some point with what happens about the other 9.7 if the trends are not taking us in the right direction. Right now, it sounds like it's somewhat vague. It's out there as a target with a number of possibilities, but nothing specific, which is okay if we come back to it. I don't want to take too much time. The other thing was, you did talk about community solar, and I remember it probably was about a year ago that you made a presentation on that, and the commission asked you to take a look at some of the risk balance between the city and participants and so on. And I see this is coming back, is it in the spring or earlier, to the city council to proceed with that? I may have the dates wrong, but it's coming back fairly soon. I was wondering what happened with that program in terms of the evaluation on risk balance and so on.
So we submitted an informational report to the UAC in July, and that also went on to council in August, which is referenced on page 6. And so that kind of gives quite a bit of detail about the results from the risk assessment.
But to summarize, wasn't the city negotiating with a private sector vendor, and those negotiations were discontinued over basically legal terms and conditions, although going to the issue of risk issues for not just legal T's and C's, but risk issues. Is that a correct statement? Yeah. And if I understand correctly from this, the city appears to be proceeding on its basically saying so long to the private sector vendor, and rather than seek another private sector vendor, do it itself. Am I understanding that correctly, or?
We've kind of reevaluated our strategy. So we're certainly not seeking at this point a turnkey vendor, but we do expect to have partnerships with the private sector to implement and also develop the facility.
Someone's, right, the utility department's not building it itself, and it could be a different operation. In other words, you're looking at a new model or a new approach to delivering fundamentally the same result.
Okay, so I just want one other thing. It's more of a kind of request. If you look on the table of table 3 in their staff report, it talks about a number of dates approximately when items will come to the UAC, the Finance Committee, and Council for review. And so you've got community solar in spring of 2016, solar donation program in summer 2016, and further down in the text, not on the table, it said a successor program to the net energy metering program. Successor will come to the UAC in early 2016. So it's just a thought that even though we pay a lot of attention to solar and so on, even so, for me, it's kind of confusing about how these programs all fit together, even the names. Sometimes I read one and I'm thinking something else. I think it would be helpful if we didn't piecemeal those in the way these are brought. It sounds like they're going to be close enough in time in early 2016 that we could package all of those I just mentioned in one presentation and then roll them forward up through the UAC, Finance, and City Council, and thinking that they would appreciate looking at these things together, all these items together, rather than fragmented. It's just a request.
We'll take that comment, but, some of these things have different timelines, and they have reasons for that, and we don't want to hold one up that's ready until another one that's not ready is finally done, and so we may or may not be able to do that kind of packaging.
I think you keep repeating all the different elements of these memos.
Yeah, we can inform each time we bring one what's the status of all the other programs that we're working on in the local solar plan.
Jane, just to note, that should probably also be noted on the forecast on this calendar.
Okay. Ready?
Is it fair game if I ask a question that's in the background or make a comment?
Yeah, of course.
So I think if I read right, and thank you for the detailed report, that there's a sort of a collective disappointment in solar thermal. And we had been chatting about this a bit as I got a briefing and understood more of the utility plans. What's interesting is it seems as though general uptake tells us all that the economics have been poor for solar thermal heating. But when you go and look at the Department of Energy website, it tells you that in general, it pays back in the long run quite well, works in any climate, makes a bunch of comments about how much sunshine you have, and of course we have plenty. And reading I've read, done in the past, sort of points at being able to get to about 80% efficiency with solar thermal. And here we are trying to figure out what to do with photovoltaic, which will get us to something like 20 or less. So I guess I'll sign on to the general disappointment. And when you look at the goal that's set forth, we got a long way to go to get to that goal. But it's a fantastic goal given the tremendous efficiency. And I'll see if I can dig up the report that I found for the fine citizen in Montana who built the Home Depot version that sits beside his house, so not at risk of flooding his house in an earthquake, probably doesn't violate California building code, and pulls it off in an economic fashion. So just general comment. Two quick questions. Is there a risk that the SB1 limit goes up between now and 2023, and we need some kind of momentum to get there, to get to the 4%? Or is there already when you're in your analysis, is there already so much momentum that even if that were to happen, we'd make it to the new target of 6, just to imagine?
Are you referring to the local solar plan goal specifically?
Yeah.
As it's been kind of brought up by a couple commissioners already how dynamic this marketplace is. So we expect to need to reevaluate our progress towards the goal on a fairly regular basis. Another point that I'll bring up regarding Table 2 that we had discussed before, the paragraph below that, it also discusses, at least based on our current analysis, it would be much harder to achieve that goal without actually having 3 megawatts of solar through our CLEAN program, which hasn't had any installed capacity to date. And also that community solar program and also solar donation program. So I guess to your point, it will need to be reevaluated as the market changes and as the state mandates and regulations change.
Okay, and last quick question, I might have missed it, but have you done a theoretical calculation on what happens if, assuming today's efficiencies, every resident puts solar on their roof and every business puts solar on their roof? What number do we get to? I'm guessing it's way above 4%, but I'm wondering, is it 50 or is it 20 or where we end up?
So the solar technical potential assessment is kind of effectively that. So it uses remote sensing data to basically create a 3-dimensional map of the city, and by modeling the path of the sun and also our longitude and latitude and a bunch of other characteristics such as the slope of roofs and other spaces, that's kind of the number that you arrive at, like all of the area that's kind of suitable for solar based on a variety of different thresholds. And then if economics were not an issue and everyone installed solar, like what that number would be. So, yeah.
So we've done that, but
so the number is pretty large, as you might imagine. So for rooftops specifically, it was over 300 megawatts, and the local solar plan goal is 23 megawatts. But that's not taking into account any economic considerations. And
right.
Sure, people do things for reasons that are not economic, but not obviously. I don't think that's the majority of people.
Okay, so in other words, you have a ton of headroom
You could say that.
in terms of space, if the economics weren't an issue.
There's, well, there are a lot of roofs.
A lot of roofs.
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems, though, that, the amount of roofs is sort of a nice way to look at it, but it also is, this, we're talking about not just distributed generation, but distributed financing. And that, what is going to cause individual homeowners to decide that they want to make this commitment and do this. So have you done any studies or focus groups or informal conversations to find out when people are putting it on their rooftops, why are they doing it? And if they're not, why are they not doing it? You know, because I think that it's one thing for us to sort of debate and discuss putting solar in places where we have where we can say, oh, let's do it on city parking garages, where we might be able to decide to do it for reasons beyond just the simple economics. But if you're talking about individual homeowners being willing to do it, then there are other things involved. So have you done any market segmentation or analysis of looking at why do people do it and why do people not do it?
So that's effectively the market and economic potential assessment that kind of builds on the technical potential assessment. So that's what we're in the process of doing now. So for instance, on page 4, the solar potential assessment, so that kind of includes technical potential, which is very large, and then it willows down when you consider economics and kind of market opportunity. And so there are some things that have been taken into consideration that are listed there under solar technical potential, but we're in the process of refining that analysis, because you're exactly...
A4 is what you're talking about, or a different page?
On just page 4, it talks a little bit more about the solar potential assessment, which includes the technical, economic, and market potential assessment. So, yeah, as you point out,
So we're not done, but we appreciate the comment, and we are kind of on track to look at that, but we're not done with our analysis. We've done the technical potential, and we're still doing the market potential. We're not proposing anything to you here with regard to that right now. We're just telling you what steps we are undertaking so far. So you asked us if we'd done this, and the answer is no, not yet, but we're in the process of doing this market potential assessment.
You are looking at, what I'm trying to get at is,
Yes.
these are emotional issues for a lot of people, not
Yes.
technical ones. So I'm just wanting to make sure that we're looking at it from the human beings factor, of why they would want to do it or not do it. That's all.
Thanks for a great report and a great analysis. So I completely support the staff's recommendation. I think the report, the memo, and tonight's presentation make it really clear to me that that's the right thing to do. When I read the report, I get the impression that we've been hugely successful as a city in encouraging deployment of solar. And I think the message that I should be getting out of the report is we're ending PV partners, or recommending to end PV partners, for a lot of good reasons, but we're not deciding to stop encouraging the deployment of solar. We intend to continue encouraging the deployment of solar because we believe more and more solar, distributed generation of solar in Palo Alto is a good idea. Is that correct?
definitely.
I'm not sure that message is as easy and clear for either the reader of the memo or for someone listening to your presentation as you might like. And I think many of the comments of my fellow commissioners tonight are because it does take a fair bit of effort, I think, for the reader to understand that the city is as enthusiastic and as aggressive about encouraging the deployment of solar as ever. We're just talking about ending one particular program out of a portfolio of programs, a particular program that has been wildly successful, but it's served its purpose, and it's now time to end that program so we can put resources elsewhere.
This is great feedback, and we'll make sure when this goes to the council, we point out how successful we've been.
Thank you, Director Fong, and that's really my point. Getting back to the comments that I think Vice Chair Cook made about the request from Finance back in March, I think we all infer from that request that they're eager to see solar programs continue as strongly as ever in Palo Alto. That's why they were asking you. And I think it's really to staff's credit that you recognize that the particular program they asked about isn't the right one to continue to put resources into. But the answer to finance shouldn't begin and end by saying that what we're going to do with your enthusiasm for PV partners is tell you it's time to end it. That's really got to be part of a much bigger, more enthusiastic statement. Otherwise, as a journalist would say, we're burying the lead here. And the lead is not that we're killing PV partners. And we sure hope that the Palo Alto Weekly doesn't make that their headline either, right? The lead is that we're going to continue to be a world leader in encouraging solar.
Thank you.
Thank you for the report. I want to comment on community solar. I'm a very substantial supporter of community solar. I think solar is an exciting opportunity for everyone in Palo Alto, but the reality is residential solar is not something that is available to everyone in Palo Alto. Obviously people, and I'm not just talking about residential or business, anyone who rents their place, whether a home or apartment or a business, really does not have solar, the ability to install their own solar. Even homeowners, of course, who do own may not be able to because of where their house is sited, trees and all that sort of stuff. So I think community solar is very important. I was very enthusiastically supportive of CPAU's plans to go with a private sector vendor. We see these programs popping up around the U.S. No reason why we can't do it too. Frankly, the biggest problem in Palo Alto was a place to put the solar panels. So it was surprising and disappointing that fell apart. These things happen. It is what it is. It was obviously wise to be looking out for the best interest of Palo Alto customers. And so I'm pleased to see sort of a new effort to try it again. In looking at the timetable, this seems reasonable of coming back in the spring and hopefully launching a program in the winter. And so I would just emphasize that I think it's very important to do this. And so I look forward to that. That's all I have. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the staff recommendation, which again is to end the PV Partners program as planned for rebates for customer-sited solar photovoltaic systems once the state legislative requirements set forth in the California Million Roof Solar Bill have been fulfilled. Any second. James beat you to it, Mike. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, next up is item number 2, conversion of the Palo Alto Green Gas Program from an opt-in program to an opt-out program. This is a discussion item. We do not have a staff presentation on this. Director Fong, I think what we're going to do here is we're going to have public comment and then discussion. Obviously, if you or members of the CPAU team would like to chime in, you're welcome to provide any feedback. Are there any comments you want to make on this at the outset? Okay, sounds good. So in that case, we'll go to public comment. We have 2 comments cards. Lisa Van Dusen, Sandra Slater, you guys can go in whatever order you would prefer.
Chair Foster?
Yes.
Even though there's no staff presentation, can staff remind us of how this item came to be before us, and if there's any relevant history we should have in mind of why we're discussing opt-in versus opt-out tonight?
So I'm going to answer that question.
Thank you.
And the reason for that is there has been some community interest in the issue of switching to opt-out. So this came to the UAC, and so we at the UAC asked staff to put it on the agenda so it could be discussed.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Sandra, you're up. Yeah, if you would, come on up. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me. And thanks so much for all of you for considering the opt-out option for Palo Alto utility ratepayers and the green gas program. And thanks also for your hard work on making our utility as wonderful as it is. I think it's the best in the country. It's my somewhat biased opinion. I especially appreciate your willingness to address sustainability in our utilities, and keeping sustainability as one of the key principles by which you're operating. And you've been doing a terrific job, as has staff. I think is really needs to be commended. But now it's time to move the needle a little further along. Everything that we know about human behavior, and we humans are kind of a strange animals. shows that opting out instead of opting in delivers up to 90% participation rate in almost all cases versus opting in, whether it's putting money automatically in our retirement accounts or organ donation, or even, I just read in the newspaper a couple of days ago that San Francisco has a Clean Power San Francisco program where it will be an opt-out if you want to stay with PG&E. So it's even on the utility side. So I think this is becoming quite widespread on the opt-out initiatives. So this brings us to our business today, and I'd like to encourage you to make Palo Alto Green Gas Program opt-out in order to achieve a much higher participation rate. While it's terrific that we've gotten 4% in the first few months here, we can keep it we can generate a much higher accelerated pace if we do an opt-out. How high, I don't really know, but I suspect it's quite substantial. And I believe that Palo Altans want to be as green as possible, especially if the threshold is low to participate. That we achieved a 24% participation rate after 5 years for Palo Alto Green is a testament to our commitment as a community, but it was certainly a heavy lift and a slow ramp up. We've come up with some ideas that we think will make the program successful and equitable and take into consideration various income levels and also a willingness to be green. So you might want to see, Lisa Van Dusen and I wrote a letter a couple of days ago, and you might want to see that letter, refer to that letter for some of the suggestions that we've made. You have the opportunity to move the needle quickly as opposed to slowly, and this is not a question of whether to initiate or implement a program, just a matter of scaling quickly and making it more successful. This is not really a heavy lift. There'll be plenty of time for that later when we come back not only to you, but to the city to move the needle aggressively on our carbon footprint in other ways. So the planet is running out of runway around climate change, and we have an opportunity to show our commitment in each decision we make. You have a wonderful opportunity to make the right decision today, and it's a great next step. And I'd like to thank you very much for all your consideration.
Thanks very much. Ms. Van Dusen?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lisa Van Dusen. Good to see you all. And I don't want to belabor what Sandra just talked about, because I think you've all seen and maybe even had a chance to read the email that we sent. On another point, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I'm one of the 54 people that signed contracts to do the home solar, so I'm happy to discuss our process with you at any point in time. It was interesting, and it was building on some of the audits process that is also offered by the city of rebate. So anyway, interesting discussion there. So thank you for all your efforts, and it's clear that the headline is not buried about really everybody's desire to make sustainability a priority, so thank you for that. I think that the main thing I want to say is that while this notion of having an opt-out is not perfect, it's buying offsets, which we know has its limitations, it's an opportunity to not have the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is something that can happen, it would seem, with relative ease and happen in parallel with other efforts. And the objections, just in conversation with various people, seem to be pretty addressable. One being, it's not green enough. There could be possibly an option to even pay more and have more aggressive offsets. If people are concerned that they might have missed the fact that something was being added to their bill without their explicit desire for that, there could be a liberal amnesty period for, say, for 6 months of the program, so that people have the opportunity to get out and even get a refund early on. And if those that are on a very tight budget, you could not have the people that are part of the rate assistance program, they could be automatically opt-in. I think there are a lot of ways, if you really sort of stare down what the objections might be, to address them. And having watched the opt-in process with regard to the electrical supply, it was a lot of effort, I'm sure a lot of money and a lot of staff time that went into getting to that absolutely, top in the country, 24%. And still, I don't think anyone would really say that's success in terms of what we'd like to see. So just in terms of resource allocation, I think we have an opportunity to kind of redirect that and flip it on its ear and see where we could get. So I urge you all to continue to be the leaders that I know you to be, and I'm happy to be a partner in helping to make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Fong, I'm a participant in the green gas program. And so my dollars that I spend extra every month, as I understand it, are used to purchase offsets that, if I remember correctly, and I didn't go back and research this, so if I'm completely wrong, feel free to tell me, that are used at a dairy processor in Wisconsin for methane conversion or something like that. And again, if I'm completely wrong, feel free to tell me.
Pretty much on target.
Okay, so but for my dollars and anyone else in Palo Alto participating, this program would not happen, the methane would not be converted to electricity, and that would be that. Is that correct?
Oh, I'm sorry, can you ask your question once
But
again?
for these dollars, in other words, are my dollars and anyone else's dollars participating in this program generating a result that would not occur otherwise?
I'm not sure I actually know the answer to that.
Jane, do you know?
I think they do. I think that the protocols that we use for the offsets are the only ones that are accepted by the California Air Resources Control Board, or Air Resources Board. And so they have to be additive. So that's one of the components of something. So that if it wasn't funded, it wouldn't get done. So that's what you're saying.
That's
So,
what I assumed.
yeah.
And so then
So they are very high quality offsets.
Okay, and so I can assume my dollars and anyone else's dollars are being spent in a way that does reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, right? To a small extent.
Yes, if CARB knew otherwise, they would not allow that protocol.
I figured as much. And the figure of $5 to $6 per month for the green gas participant median, is that in fact the correct figure?
It's very seasonal. It's $12. It's 12 cents per therm, and so it depends on how much you use. And people use more in the winter generally. So the amount per month changes.
But in an average month, I mean, are we in the ballpark? I'm just trying to
I think that is
verify the
about
figures.
about the
Ballpark.
right amount. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So I will say, and folks should ask questions of staff, and this is a discussion item, so we're here to discuss it among ourselves. I'm supportive of this proposal. People can opt out. We're not if we were forcing it down people's throats, I would probably feel differently. People can opt out. I would say my two biggest concerns are that if we go to an opt-out approach, some people will send inserts in the bills and everything else, and some people will not read them, and then later say, wait a second, I'm being charged $5 more, I'm unhappy. So be it. I think the approach recommended of having sort of a 6-month period where people can ask for their money back is fine, and after that they can opt out going forward is fine. So I'm supportive of this approach. The other potential concern, is this a real program? Is it actually having a real impact? And my impression is it is. And so I'm in favor of this proposal of recommending to the City Council that we switch to an opt-out approach. Arnie?
Just to add a little color, the work going on in Wisconsin, I mean, that someone has to carry out the exercise of operating the digester. I mean, every day they have to go and take samples and figure out what it's going to take to keep the digester alive inside and so on. It's not like they set it and walk away and are raking in dollars. That's an intensive business, and they've got to keep it working. And so, your little analysis absolutely makes sense that people who have already opted in are causing a real thing to happen that wouldn't have another way to happen. Those people have to go to work with that intention.
James?
Yeah, so I think I want to give a slightly different color to the Palo Alto Green program than our citizen speakers did. So it was a fantastic success. The fact that we reached the percentage of people that joined in was noted here very positively and noted nationally, and I wouldn't be surprised if it were noted internationally. It was a great success. So when we were looking at, because it was overcome by events, we created a system where essentially we had 100% Palo Alto Green use by having a carbon neutral electrical portfolio. We, the staff, the UAC and the City Council sought to take that great energy that we had from everyone and transform it into a new program that made sense. And from the very beginning, I thought the Palo Alto Green Gas Program was a great way to transform the program to a new goal. And at the time that we were setting it up, we did ask why couldn't this be an opt-out program? And for the life of me, despite having been through that, I couldn't articulate why we did not have a opt-out program. We wanted to, but we're told that that's not possible. And so I'd like to hear again, so that at least I know, but hopefully other people will benefit from this, why, again, we don't have an opt-out program, and what way does us not being able to have an opt-out program for Palo Alto Green Gas differ from the community choice aggregation programs that are set up that are automatically opt-in. Sorry if I've set these out wrong. So the community choice aggregation programs, you automatically are, it's set up as an opt-out. Why is ours different, and what's the argument for why we didn't do ours as an opt-out?
And out of curiosity, should that be a question for CPAU or a question for the city attorney?
Whichever one you guys prefer.
You want?
Business.
Okay.
Well, I'll explain the background and just a little bit about the Palo Alto Green, the electric program, how that started out. That was a program that cost people 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour originally, and that was on an average rate of 11 or 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So that was a significant percentage increase that people volunteered to pay. And that was, as you noted, a very successful program. It was not replaced by anything. We instead went a totally different route and developed the carbon neutral plan, which we saw coming towards us anyway, because we're half hydro, and we saw that we were going to get over 33% under the council's goal for our renewable portfolio supplies anyway. Now it's 50, right, as of today. And so without doing anything effectively, we would ultimately become carbon neutral at no additional cost to anyone. That's quite different from the, like right now, our gas rate is about $1 a therm, and so adding 12 cents is not insignificant. But people will volunteer and have volunteered to pay that. The community choice aggregation programs are pretty much no additional cost beyond PG&E. Some of the programs have some different options, and those you do kind of have to opt into, as I understand it, and those can be a higher percentage of green power in the portfolio, and those will cost you extra. But most of the CCAs that I've seen, I don't believe that there really is an additional cost that you're kind of opted into or you're slammed into, which, so there's really not a whole lot of reason that people would be or should be worried about being sort of slammed into these programs. So our reason originally was we wanted to at least have some period of time where we could have the Palo Alto Green Gas Program as a volunteer program to see if how much community interest there is in this. when we have barely got the thing really off the ground. The biggest thing that happened now, and the reason we have some amount of participation, is the city participated for all the municipal buildings, and that's a significant load right there. Not that many customers, but a fair amount of gas load. And then there are many people like Chair Foster who got into the program too, and many of the people who were in the Palo Alto Green Electric program that got into that program, or that are now participating in Palo Alto Green Gas. But we haven't, I don't know how much you have seen much marketing on this program. We haven't been able to market this program much at all yet. So we haven't really tried to market it. We'd like to have some more time. That was the reason that we gave back when. You asked me what the reason was back then, and that is the reason that we gave back then. And you can argue whether that was a good reason then or whether it's a good reason now. So that is just what we said back then. But at this point, it's still a significant cost increase for people, completely different from the carbon neutral program. And remember, the Palo Alto Green Gas program was buying RECs for 100% of your load. And remember, we're buying RECs for a small percentage of the load in the carbon neutral program because we're counting hydro and all of our eligible renewable, and we're only buying renewable energy certificates for the little bit gap that there is, and that gap is going to go away as we move towards 2017, if we get an average hydro year.
Okay, so thank you, but that doesn't actually answer my question. So it does give the history of how you presented it and how we went there, but it does. You said it's a significant difference. However, our rates are allowed to go up with the carbon neutral portfolio, and the rates are allowed to go up with the Palo Alto Green Gas. So it's not like 1 versus 0. It's both going up, but one's just going up more. So what's the threshold for having an opt-out program versus an opt-in program? It can't be that it's a lot more. I'm sure there's some sort of, there's either a number threshold or there isn't. And if there isn't a number threshold, then it is allowed, we could have an opt-out program.
James, can I chime in for just one sec? And Jane, as you guys were having this conversation, I was sort of inclined to think that the comparison between the Palo Alto Green Gas program and the carbon neutral program is a little bit apples and oranges, because carbon neutral is neither opt-in nor opt-out. It's everybody. So the cost increase there is very small, and that's why we're okay with making it for everybody. If it were a big increase, we probably wouldn't have done it. So I think the comparison is green gas versus Palo Alto Green, the original program, which was not as small an increase, and we did it as an opt-in. Now we're doing green gas. And by the way, one other thing we looked at was the possibility of automatically converting all green electric to green gas, and again, we decided not to do that either. And so I think realistically, we're seeing this very slow ramp, just like we did with Palo Alto Green, and I think the idea of this is to change that. So I think the comparison with carbon neutral is not that relevant, to be honest, my opinion. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Carry on. Any other response? Here's one thing I'd say, and this follows up on your point, is there any legal reason that the city council could not make it an opt-out program, an opt-out program?
Jessica Mullen from the City Attorney's Office, and I think the answer to my question would depend on the design of the particular opt-out program. I think that as we listen to discussions from UAC and staff does work potentially to develop such a program, then I think we can offer a more detailed legal analysis.
Can I ask a question about the goal of the program? Is the goal of the program to encourage people to use less gas, or is the point of the program to just generate more revenue?
No, it's neither one. The point of the program, using less gas is nice, but that is definitely not a point of the program, nor to generate additional revenue. The idea is using gas generates greenhouse gases, and the idea is to offset that by, as it turns out, converting methane to electricity somewhere or other.
So we're not asking any customers to have a behavior change as a result of this
Zero
program?
behavior change. It's almost the equivalent of when you fly and take an airplane flight and you have an option to offset the emissions from that flight. And my guess is, by the way, that the analogy is actually, that's a pretty good one, because my guess is a tiny percentage, that's an opt-in program when you do that flight, right? And probably very few people do it. If we're an opt-out, my guess is many more people will do it.
So I'm familiar with the study they did at SMUD where they had the opt-out versus opt-in, and so, you know, I definitely support the idea that, or, you know, agree that more people will do it, and I think to the extent that we're testing and familiarizing ourselves with the idea of an opt-out program, I think that is a really important thing to do, because I think there are some other places we may want to apply that, because the idea of using default rates or opt-out, I think what goes with that is that it has to be very easy for someone to get out if they didn't realize, and sort of to be able to have sort of insurance that they will not be penalized for the months they didn't realize that they had it. So I think that's an important thing if we want people to be supportive of it, so the people who are participating are truly in favor of what's happening. And I guess I would also like to suggest that this actually might be a bridge to get people to be more aware of their gas use, and that we should think of it as, you know, one way to get people to be conscious of the energy that they're using. And so I don't know that we should be so quick to just let go of the idea of it might, I mean, I think it would be great if people were more aware of what they were doing and how much and how resources. So not just that you buy your way out of a problem, but that you now, oh my God, I'm thinking about this now. Hey, do I really need to turn the heat up this much? Do I have another way of doing this? So I would like us to consider that it has an impact in a larger impact than just accounting.
Okay.
You know, without diversity of opinion, what use would this commission be to you? So I think that, and I'd be interested in Ms. Elvert's thoughts, either if this continues to future meetings, but even tonight. One of the things I worry about is that there's a percentage of folks who, somewhat like me, throw their bills away. I look at the because there's a lot of good information about conservation and so on, I could quickly look. But on my bill itself, I look at the bottom line, hit the button, pay, boom, gone. I think that there'd be a percentage of folks who, even though they may find out later that they were locked in inadvertently to a high price on the gas and had a chance to say, hey, you know, wait a minute, I didn't, and then bow out 6 months later. I think there's a sense of being cheated when that happens. And I don't think that that would be good for the city or the Palo Alto utilities to be part of that. I think that there's another thought that I have where that wouldn't really happen in the same way. And that is, you know, the way we developed this carbon neutral plan over time, it didn't just happen overnight. It took many years, step by step by step. I actually think that there's a way forward that I would support, that is developing a maybe carbon negative plan where you actually start to look at carbon offsets with natural gas in the same general purpose as this, over time involving citizens and others to idea that maybe you step a little bit gradually into that. In a sense, you start with a surcharge, well advertised to the community at large on gas, because as a community, this is a good thing to do for global warming. I think that would work. I do think that, staged in that way and implemented slowly with lots of input, and for those who felt that they just didn't want to, or low income, or any other reason, an opt-out on that might be okay, because that seems to be a program which would be broadly advertised, publicly involved. Contrast that with the idea that if we did the flip side, which I'm not thinking the city would do, but we just decided quickly to implement the program as an opt-out program, you know, I don't know what communication would be adequate to allow everybody in the city to really know this was happening. And I think that some people would pick up on that and opt out if they wished, but a large part would be in there without realizing it and perhaps resentful when they find out.
Oh, There's a really cool video that I recruited for a contest one time called Cow Power, and it sort of talks about and it's a really fun video, and I'll get it to Catherine so that she can share it with everybody. But you know, I think that this is one of those things that can be done in a way that is, I'll call it a little playful, that it has sort of a fun aspect to it that can be sort of warm and fuzzy and let people understand that we're in this together. And that is actually the idea of we're in this together is a message that turns out to be much more compelling in a lot of places than just, are you saving money or not saving money or whatever. And I think this is one of the places that we want to try and experiment with communications that may be a little different and not be dry, but do something that is fun and lively and that people will talk about.
Steve, you're up.
Sure, thanks. I really wanted to thank the people from the public who spoke, and I guess just as a matter of process, I really wanted to compliment the UAC and the utilities staff for allowing this item to come forward. This is kind of an interesting thing that we don't usually do. I believe that what we've done here has not cost much in the way of staff time because there hasn't been a staff analysis yet. And so this is really responsiveness to the community of the highest order. The community wanted us to address something, and we're addressing it, and we're talking about it. And I think that's good. When I think about opt-in versus opt-out, I don't want to repeat all the great observations that my fellow commissioners have made, but when I think about it, I feel like opt-out moves us incrementally in the direction of slightly less freedom and slightly more social engineering. Clearly not all the way, because we're not forcing anybody to do anything, but incrementally in that direction. And so when I weigh the advantages and disadvantages, I find myself thinking mostly about customer satisfaction with the utilities department and our desire to avoid disgruntled customers. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions matters a lot. Customer satisfaction with the utilities department also matters a lot. We spend a lot of time each year advising the utilities department on, on ways that we think they can get even higher customer satisfaction than the extraordinarily high customer satisfaction that they already enjoy. And so I think the greatest danger of an opt-out plan is potential damage to customer satisfaction with the utilities department. And I think a well-designed opt-out plan, and many of my fellow commissioners, as well as the people from the public, have had suggestions on what best practices would be for a sensitive and customer-centric opt-out plan. But I still think even a well-designed opt-out plan does put customer satisfaction a bit more at risk than an opt-in plan. We heard a lot about the difference in price between being part of the program and not part of the program. Clearly, as that difference becomes significant, the danger of damaging customer satisfaction with an opt-out plan becomes worse. I think we also need to ask ourselves, once the utilities department has had a chance to put all of their creative marketing behind an opt-in plan, is it still plausible that anyone who wants to participate won't have opted in? And so it may be that an opt-in program and an opt-out program in fact converge after a few years on a similar point. I find myself mildly in favor of opt-in over opt-out. It's not something that I have horribly strong feelings about, but the customer satisfaction issue does weigh very heavily for me. I guess I also just wanted to point out, we're not actually recommending anything to the commission tonight. There has been no staff analysis of this. This is a discussion. Staff may or may not choose to do a full analysis and come back to us for a recommendation based on tonight. But I would be very disappointed if we were to turn this item, for which there's been no staff analysis, into something that drives a recommendation to the City Council, and I would hope we don't go in that direction tonight.
So I have a few comments on that. Steve, thanks very much for your comments. There's one point you made that I do not disagree with that I think is worth noting, and that is... Only one? Only one. And that is you believe that the opt-in and opt-out well-designed would converge. I don't think that's the case, or to be honest, I don't even think it's close to the case. I think Palo Alto Green Electric was fabulous. And what was the ending participation? 24%. I bet you dollar to donuts that if it had been opt-out, it would have ended at 90% or 80%, but whatever, not 26%. And I think there's just an enormous amount of people, and by and large, I'm one of them, that just don't have time for this sort of stuff one way or the other. Because of our role on the UAC, I took the time and signed up on the first day and so on and so forth. But there's a million of these things, and I mostly ignore them. If someone said, and by the way, we're talking about $5 or $6 as a percentage of my gas bill, whatever that is, but of course, as a percentage of my overall utility bill, to me, that's a very small number. I'd be like, absolutely do it, and so on and so forth. So that's one thing I disagree with. On your last point on the issue of what we're doing tonight, I wasn't going to raise that issue. This is a discussion item. I'm not sure we even can make a recommendation if it is a discussion item. Jessica, you're shaking your head, so we can't. So that resolves that. Having said that, I'm not certain the staff wants to do an analysis or a report on this, but we'll find that out in just a moment. I would be prepared, whether tonight or next month or whenever, after whatever happens. I mean, for example, we should let the city attorney's office take a look at this. From what I've heard, I'd be prepared to move forward and make a recommendation to the city council, but I'm fine holding off for a month to allow an analysis to occur.
I think the point that I'm trying to make is there is nothing to recommend at this point. It's not as simple. I don't believe it's as simple as saying to the city council, we'd like to switch this program to opt-out. There is no opt-out design. There is no opt-out implementation plan. You already mentioned there is no legal analysis. We don't have a fiscal analysis yet, right? There is no plan to recommend. This is a conceptual discussion tonight, and in my opinion, there's a huge but really important gap between a conceptual idea and a specific plan, particularly, as we all know, in something like utilities, where the details matter so much.
So I've got a fabulous response to that, and that is I agree with you, with the caveat that the recommendation I would make to the city council would be not to adopt an opt-out program, but to ask the staff to do the work necessary to prepare for the adoption or a recommendation on the topic.
Right, or to evaluate the possibility of. Sure.
Exactly. That's the recommendation I would make, with the idea that that we then come back in a month or two or whatever it takes for a formal recommendation.
So I want to address the issue of customer satisfaction. So I think so a lot of what Commissioner Hall was talking about has to do with the idea of transparency. So if customers feel that you're being transparent and what you're trying to do is consistent with the way they perceive your brand, then it's a lot easier for people to accept, and it doesn't. So the fact that our utility cares about being green is very much consistent with the brand, okay? And the idea that we've used our opportunity as an affluent community to try some things that maybe other communities can't do, because we can sort of test them out and see how they work and things like that. You know, that's a luxury that we have had as a community. And so the fact that people are being safeguarded, if that is part of the policy that goes in, that anybody who feels that, no, I can't afford this, or I don't wish to pay it, that they don't have to, it takes away the sting that says I'm forcing you to do this, because it's all consistent with what we're trying to do overall and so many other things. So I think it doesn't have to be damaging to customer satisfaction if it's done transparently.
I think that there are many people in Palo Alto who take pride in our city's environmental credentials. And I think there are a lot of people who like being provided with greener options. In other words, the ability to opt into a green program. I think as soon as you take that argument to the point of an opt-out, I come back to something different. I actually think that the things that are most important to the largest numbers of our ratepayers are a secure, consistent supply, a safe supply, and a low-cost supply. I think environmental concerns are actually fourth on that list, behind the three things I mentioned. And so I think to impose a greener solution that costs more money, I think is something we need to do very cautiously.
One thing just to, creating a contract with the dairy in Wisconsin to stop emitting methane, which they might have been doing before, and instead either clean up that gas and put it in the pipeline or make power that we end up getting, is clearly a good thing when you think about global warming and the impact of methane emissions. But a few points to consider. That dairy is finite. It's not quite the same as buying power from Bonneville or something like that. It's a finite resource, and it may be that there's already analysis that says if the entire city of Palo Alto subscribes, the dairy makes enough power from biomethane to power all of Palo Alto. I kind of doubt it. It might be a really, really big dairy, but that's only the first point. The next point is there's a lot of supply and demand thing here that's going to eventually bite us. I remember a rough thumb rule that if you put corn or something into a digester, it's like an acre per kilowatt, and it's a little challenging when you think about how much space you need to make power. And unfortunately, the cows already ate some of the energy in the corn. And then we got some things from the cows after that. So it's sort of diminishing returns as you go. So when you think about that, as let's suppose Menlo Park decides that they're going to form a magical clone of our utility, and they have a green gas program, and they call the dairy, the price is going to go up. It's a hypothetical.
I have a few comments on that.
The key is it's finite.
Well, hang on, a few comments on that. The first one, I think it's very important, and Jane, please correct me if I'm wrong. We are not getting the electricity. The electricity doesn't come to us, so just to
But they're
clarify
making
that.
power.
But it's not coming to Palo
Well,
Alto.
I get it.
Okay.
We don't see those electrons,
Right.
but those electrons go into the grid in Wisconsin.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That,
So
just want to
virtually-
clarify the point. Right.
Absolutely, but
Okay.
it's finite.
So that point I don't understand. Why
The
is it?
dairy is only so big.
Of course.
There are only so many cows.
Right, but one
And at some point-
presumably can go to a secondary,
And
a
that's
third,
when,
fourth.
but there will be a supply and demand curve to this.
There will be an endless opportunity to buy carbon offsets for that. There are so many opportunities. Or reforestation, thank you, Garth.
Yeah, if we were New York City or China or something, but at Palo Alto, I hear
Right,
the
so
concern.
at the very least, if you created an opt-out program, then all of a sudden we'd have to know that the dairy's big enough.
Or the dairies.
Or the
there are multiple
dairies,
dairies.
right.
So, and I think this goes to Commissioner Egglash's point that we need to give the opportunity to the staff to kind of look into this and see how this would work. So here's what,
Well, I might
Go ahead, Mike.
chime in with a few comments. I've been
Yep.
silent. First, Lisa and Sandra, thank you very much for pushing the issue. I think it's great. Yeah, we all recognize the carbon benefit. I think there's a psychological benefit of being greener. There's a symbolic benefit of Palo Alto, isn't it? It's more moral. Frankly, I'm more in line with Garth's recommendation that we just make it part of our utility plan altogether and build it into the rate base, and there's no way I'll opt in or no opt out. It's like our clean electricity. I think the opt-out program is actually a step less of a smaller imposition on people because they can choose not to do it. And I understand your point about customer satisfaction, but I don't have a lot of sympathy for someone who finds it too hard to get on a website and say, I opt out. They have to do that every day, all the time. I'd rather we be moral, that we be symbolic, that we be greener. And except if there are some cranky customers who don't read their bills like I don't and want to opt out, afterwards, we can live with that, in my view. John, your thoughts about how to proceed were the same as mine. I'd love to see this go to the city council. I don't know the right process, but certainly having it worked up by the staff would be good, because there are considerations that we haven't thought of. And I'd like to see it with the alternative of just building this into our gas supply, so that it's not opt-in or opt-out, it's everybody.
Like the electric, what we've done on the electric side. Okay.
And may I just add, in terms of the city's sustainability goals, there's a plan around that. Let me just add, if the staff is asked to do that and do a staff analysis, I would really recommend, if it's inbound to the city council via us, is that we conduct a poll, the smallest statistically significant poll amongst residents, saying how would you regard it, this way or that way. And we could just provide a balanced situation, saying these are two different paths we have in mind for going forward. How would you react to that? I think it's important to know, because I have to admit as one, I'm somewhat shooting in the dark by using my own potential reaction as to how customers would react to this if they were surprised and then perhaps disappointed that they felt cheated. That's a personal assumption. I don't really have the data on that, and I think we would probably want to have some data on that before we proceeded with a recommendation.
I think the way the studies are designed, it defeats the purpose of opt-out if you polled people ahead of time. If you asked them if they wanted opt-out or opt-in, it kind of, it's just the way these studies are designed. It's kind of.
You'd only be polling that small percentage of people who read their emails.
Right.
So.
Let me just comment on one point, as we've talked about the issue of potentially unhappy customers if we went opt-out. I'd point out that Ms. Van Duzen in her email addressed this issue, and her proposal is that anyone who was basically on day one, everyone would be in the program, that anyone who failed to opt out and then in the first 6 months wanted to would be able to get the full amount of money back. I'd support that. I just mentioned that that's a way of addressing these concerns. Frankly, potentially you could do that on an infinite basis, not even the first 6 months. You could say anyone could opt out at any time and get the 6 months back. That creates a little more accounting headache for this staff, which is why I actually kind of prefer the way that Ms. Van Duzen has done it, but it's just something to think about. Ms. Mullen, so you're telling me that if I made a motion right now to recommend to the City Council that they direct staff to look into this, you would tell me I cannot do that, right?
Can I just, I think, I guess we should get the legal answer to that, but I almost think it's moot, because we'll just put it on the rolling calendar and we'll figure out what it takes for us to do an analysis, and then we'll fit it in. But you may want the legal answer, I don't know.
Well, sometimes there's some sort of benefit to getting a little City Council involvement before we all. I don't want.
Okay, this is not
I'm concerned about spinning up. We don't direct you guys.
Chair Foster appreciates your offer.
I would have thought so, but to be clear, a simple thing going to the council is not a simple thing, and we probably wouldn't get it to the council this year anyway. Just to be clear.
Okay.
Well,
That's the funniest line of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Jessica.
And just to amplify what Director Fong mentioned, is that you are correct that it is listed as a discussion item. And so the commission is not able to take action for Brown Act reasons on a discussion item. However, the future agenda items that Director Fong was referring to is listed as an action item, which would mean that per bylaws section 7.7, if two commissioners are interested in adding something to a rolling calendar to consider, you could take that particular action on this item there.
I figured that's probably where we were heading. So that's good, and I've already noted it down. Okay, anyone else then?
Yeah, I just had one last thing. I didn't say it when I had my comments. I really appreciate Sandra Slater and Lisa, our former colleague, Lisa Van Dusen, for your email and for bringing this forward. Thanks, guys.
Can I just say that even though I was taking a different path, I really do respect your drive and your purpose, because many of us, including me, share that the general purpose where you're heading is well shared.
Okay, so Lisa and Sandra, just so you know, the next item on the agenda is not on this topic. Then the item after that is selection of potential topics, and the reality is I think we're going to come back to this, and you can hang out, or we'll let you know.
How about I disagree? We'll put it on there and we can.
So wait, you're going to, so, all right, so let's discuss that. So I would have
Oh, I
requested.
thought I was going to shorten the discussion.
no,
we
just
can hold
hang-
off till later.
You're supposed to
This
say
is fine.
thanks for
I'm
the
going to leave it about
recommendation.
5
Thank you for
minutes.
that.
You guys have at it.
Yes, my interpreter over here will help me out on this. But
I believe we have 5 minutes with Valerie, so let's let her.
Yeah, but just hang on, just bear with me, everyone, humor me for a sec. So I would like it to be on as an action item, that's all I'm requesting.
Yeah. What I would propose to do is, for purposes of right now, we'll put it on the to be scheduled, and then let us go back and figure out how much work is involved in it and what we need to do, and then we'll show it when we know we're ready to bring it forward, as an
Okay.
action item. That,
Okay.
absolutely.
And is it reasonable that that could be within the next, say, within a 3-month time frame?
I don't think so, honestly. I do think we've got a lot of
Okay,
things going
let's-
on.
we can take that
dump
with-
we'll dump community solar.
Let's not do that.
Okay,
Let's-
so
Valerie,
it's a choice. I need to go.
I will say in my chair role, I will follow up with you offline. Let's,
Yeah, that's fine. And,
Okay.
again, I won't
That's
know,
fine.
we really do need to sit back and think about it and figure out what makes sense.
Okay.
And any consumer protections we need to put in place and things like that need to be
Val, it's
considered.
been pointed out to me that you have very little time left with us, so let's move on to a concept and establishment of a UAC work plan and related subcommittees. And Steve, how are we doing this? Is there any, you're leading.
I'm giving the presentation. Should I do it from here or down there?
Oh, that's right. Actually, wait, I'm sorry, I completely forgot. We have a public comment on this. So let's do public comment first, as you guys do whatever you're doing, and then we'll get rolling. From Jeff Hoyle. Jeff, come on up. How are you?
Okay, hi. So there was no staff report on this, so I don't know what this is all about really, except for the title. So let me speak to the title. I've been having second thoughts about whether it's a good idea to have subcommittees in the first place. And there'd be some reasons to have them and some reasons not to have them. One of the reasons not to have them is it just separates a bunch of people from the main group so that they can go off with staff and have staff engage in, let's call it regulatory capture. Let's not call it brainwashing. And so the good features ought to outweigh that, right? So what would the good features be? I think one of the good features would be the subcommittee comes back and tells the whole committee what they did and what they learned so that the whole committee and the public can benefit from that. Now, in the case of the fiber to the home item last month, it was not so obvious to me that that's what happened. It was like, yeah, we had this report to study. We had it since June that staff was unwilling to show the public until September or show the majority of UAC until September. But we've had it since June, and we might have studied it, but we're not going to tell you whether we did or not. And we have some opinions about what to do next, but we're not going to tell you what we based that on. So in the discussion tonight, if you could say, well, why do we have subcommittees in the first place? What is it that subcommittee members do to help the public out and to help UAC as a body out? Thanks.
Thank you.
Should I just
Yep.
Should I just stay here?
Yeah.
See if the signal actually reaches the computer. You might have to move down.
You know what? Why don't you stay there?
Unless you think. You can hit the button, so I just want to know if it's more appropriate for me to be here or there. What do you?
I just hang tight, but
Okay, fine.
unless anyone requests.
So I'll just say next slide.
Yep.
So Director Fong or Chair Foster, were you going to say anything by way of introduction, or should I?
I'm so sorry, I did promise that. So this item is on the agenda at the request of 3 commissioners, Chair Foster, Vice Chair Cook, and Commissioner Eglash, and Commissioner Eglash has developed a presentation.
Thanks, Director Fong. I want to acknowledge that this is pretty unusual in a couple of ways. First of all, it's unusual in that a commissioner is giving the presentation instead of a member of staff. And secondly, it's unusual in that for the next couple minutes, we aren't actually talking about utilities at all. We're talking about governance and process and how the UAC operates. But I think it's interesting and important, and I hope you all do too. The work that I'm about to describe to you is something that was done with Chair Foster, Vice Chair Cook, with contributions from Director Fong, from Senior Deputy City Attorney Jessica Mullen, from Council Member Scharf, and some other informal conversations, but certainly all compliant with the Brown Act. If we can have the second slide, please. So, in summary, what we're describing here, what we're proposing is that the UAC adopt the use of something that we're calling a work plan. And the goals are to help us have a sustained focus on our most important tasks. In the course of a year, we see a whole lot of topics, 30, 40, 50 different topics, all of which are important, but some of which are more important than others. I hope that this is also something that can help us be more strategic. It's easy for us to lapse into very detailed tactical things, but I think it's also helpful to occasionally step back and remember the big picture, and I think this can help us in doing that. We spend a lot of time being reactive, dealing with things that the utilities department or the city council asks us to address. I think this can also help us to be proactive. And I think it can help us to identify and prioritize our most important items. Next slide, please. So the concept is a short list of particularly important items, items that require sustained attention over a long period of time, not the sorts of things that we address once and then we're done. And things that already have utilities department resources allocated to them. This was motivated in part by our last joint meeting with the City Council. Those of you who are new members on the UAC probably know we meet once a year in joint session with the City Council. When we did that a few months ago, there were 5 items that most of the people present seemed to agree were pretty important, had been pretty important over the course of many years. And there was some concern and some curiosity about why these items were still around, why they hadn't been addressed and put to bed. These were items like a second transmission line and undergrounding of electric power and fiber to the premises and so on. And in many cases, utilities staff or other parts of the city had been hard at work on these, but it just wasn't front of mind, and so it was hard to remember that there was progress being made. In other cases, there were reasons why they weren't receiving attention right now. But there was no easy way to keep those 5 items in front of us and remember what the status of each one was. What I'm proposing here is similar in some respects to the rolling calendar, but I think different in many others, and I'll come back to whether we think the rolling calendar, in fact, addresses everything that we're proposing here or not. Next slide, please. So here's a sketch of what I think a work plan might look like. There's no magic or pride of authorship here. This was just an attempt to make an abstract concept seem a bit more concrete. As you can see, just for fun, I filled in those 5 items that were discussed at our last joint meeting with City Council: the second electric transmission connection, electric undergrounding, fiber to the premises, recycled water, and gas electric fuel switching. I don't know that those are exactly the items we'd put on a work plan if we decided to adopt it, but I think it helps to make the example more real. And at least for me, when I think of a work plan, I think of a single-page document like this, where for each of those items, we just describe in a few words what the outcome or deliverable is that the city's seeking. If there's an appropriate deadline or target date, we could note that. If there's an ad hoc subcommittee, we could note that. We could remind ourselves of what the next step is on the way to the final outcome or deliverable, and a place for comments. And as you can see at the top, I'm imagining that we'd update this monthly prior to each UAC meeting, and then we would just provide it to the commissioners at each UAC meeting the same way we provide the rolling calendar. So that's the idea. It's worth pointing out that this is not intended to create new policy or to drive consensus or direct staff resources. The idea is more to document what's already been agreed on through all the normal processes that we already have. It's also worth remembering that the UAC doesn't direct Palo Alto Utilities staff resources. Our role is to advise the City Council. That's all we do. We don't tell the Utilities Department what to do. That goes through the City Council. Next slide, please. So, do we need a new tool or not? Is this a good idea, or can we accomplish whatever goals we decide as a commission we want to accomplish with the elements we already have in place? Well, here are some thoughts on that. We, of course, have a rolling calendar. The rolling calendar is a comprehensive list, and I'm imagining that the work plan is a short and selective list. Also, the rolling calendar has no detail on desired outcomes, on whether there are any ad hoc subcommittees or what next steps are. So to me, there's value in a work plan not captured in the rolling calendar. I also thought about our ad hoc subcommittees. We've been using ad hoc subcommittees as an important means of enabling progress on complex and important tasks. In some cases, the topics we'd put on the work plan might be the same topics for which we've assigned ad hoc subcommittees. It's possible subcommittees are an alternative to implementing a work plan, but maybe not. Not everything we do is amenable to a subcommittee. But we could also think of strengthening the subcommittees. For example, we could get more in the habit of agendizing subcommittee report outs on the work they've done. We do that occasionally. We don't do it as frequently as we might. I did take a look at our bylaws. We do have bylaws, and they're silent on the concept of a work plan, not surprisingly. And so if we decided we wanted a work plan, one of the tasks would be to figure out with the help of the city attorney and the director of utilities whether we can just do it or we should update our bylaws. I also want to point out, although not mentioned on this slide, we get a very thorough written quarterly update from the utilities department, well, quarterly. And in fact, we have one in our packet this month. And so we all have in our packets a thorough quarterly update. And that quarterly update probably addresses many of these same items that would likely go on the work plan. Next slide, please. If we chose to have a work plan, we'd need to give some thought to what the process for updating it would be. In the conversations we've had during the last couple of weeks, we've explored two options: that the UAC might be responsible for doing that. Perhaps it'd be the chair or the vice chair or their designate. Of course, the UAC doesn't really know anything on its own, so it would need to somehow get that information from the utility staff or the ad hoc subcommittees, because that's where the actual work is going on by the utility staff. Or perhaps the director of utilities, with input from the director's staff, would update the work plan. In either case, I'm very concerned about anything that increases the workload on utilities department staff. I had imagined at the outset that a work plan might actually result in a reduction of workload by making it easier for utilities staff to direct more resources towards the preeminently important ideas and perhaps proportionally less resources on other items. But I certainly acknowledge that one more item that needs to be updated with reports each month could increase the workload, and I think we need to be sensitive to that. So what would we, next slide please. So what would we actually do with a work plan if we had it? As I mentioned, my proposal is that it would be distributed here at places, like our rolling calendar, and made available to the public at that time. That we would only agendize it at the level of the work plan. So we could discuss it at a summary level, but we would not be able to get into an extensive discussion of individual item on it, because that individual item wouldn't be agendized. So if there was some individual item that we wanted to discuss, maybe we thought it was heading off track or was lagging or had too many resources assigned to it, we would have to raise that and request that that get agendized for a future meeting. Next slide, please. So what I was hoping we could do tonight is get the sense from the commissioners, as well as anyone from staff or public who wants to comment, on this idea. Should we implement a work plan? Should we implement it more or less as described here, or with some modifications? If we do that, how do we suppose it should get updated? Should it be by the UAC's chair or his or her designate, or by the utilities director? If we decided to go forward, some of the next steps might be to try to prepare an initial work plan, beginning with next month's UAC meeting, evaluate the need for updating UAC bylaws, and provide Director Fong with an opportunity to evaluate any practical aspects of implementing a work plan, like the impact on staff's workload. That's what I have. I don't know if Chair Foster or Vice Chair Cook want to either add to or correct anything that I said before we open it up for a wide-ranging discussion.
Yeah, let me chime in. Commissioner Eglash, as you gather from his presentation, this was his idea. Steve came to James and me to discuss, obviously within the limitations of the Brown Act, which is why he didn't talk to any of the rest of you. I'm very supportive of the idea. I have felt over the years that prioritization of what we do is important. For those of you who are newer to the commission, the reality is a lot of our agenda is driven by, and sometimes 100% is driven by CPAU requests, and that's okay, and they need us to do certain things as they go on to the city council. Obviously, everything they bring to us is important, but to Commissioner Eglash's point, there are some things that we may perceive as more important or more requiring our attention, or where we just simply want to track them more. And I think this is a good approach for doing so. I do feel that this should be owned by the UAC. It's our work plan. I think we should own it. I also don't think we should be asking the staff to take on more work. So in terms of updating it, although I see some logistical reasons for them to do it, I do think we should do it ourselves. And those are my comments. James, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to Commissioner Eglash. So he's as busy or more busy than the rest of us, and he drove this forward, not because he was the only one interested in it. Far from that. It was just that I really appreciate that you did make it happen. I was glad to assist in the minor ways I did, but I want to say that I'm totally supportive. I think the idea of us establishing some priority areas and following through on those would be a great precedence for the commission. Thanks.
Okay, any thoughts or comments that people want to weigh in? Mike?
Well, the three of you and Garth have been on longer than the rest of us, so I certainly defer to your views. It's good to be organized. I know it was helpful when we had those 5 issues that came out of the city council meeting, and then we talked about that in the context of the rolling forecast. And this just takes another step further, I think, and so. Good.
I guess I have a question. So does this mean that that would give us a platform for, like right now, the main reason that we can't talk about every little detail that in the meetings when if you've invested 20 to 40 hours in something, we don't have enough time in these meetings to be able to talk about it. And there's currently no way we're allowed to even write something, so it certainly wouldn't bother me to be able to write down something about what we talked about and where, like on the subcommittee that Mike and I are working on, where we have disagreement on certain points. And, right now there's kind of not really a way to get it out there. So does this give us a way that it would be okay that we could write something down and have it be shared with the public?
Should I answer that? Or
Yeah.
So I think it's unfortunate and probably inappropriate that you feel that you don't have those avenues of communication. Certainly in the ad hoc subcommittees that I've participated on over the years, I've always felt like it was part of my responsibility to share with the commission and the public the work that the subcommittee's done. And so in every case, when the subcommittee felt that it had reached a point in its labors where it had something to share, I've simply indicated that we wanted that item agendized, and we described what we had found. I think often that occurred when the item was agendized in a natural way anyway. So for example, a subcommittee to do work on the budget would naturally report out as part of a discussion item on the annual budget. But it wouldn't have to be. It could be a separate item. And in fact, Attorney Mullen and I discussed that the NCPA makes wide use of subcommittees, and they are, I think, agendized on every month's agenda. And if they don't have anything to report, they just say we have nothing to report, and that entire agenda item takes 10 seconds and you move on to the next agenda item. But subcommittees are given an opportunity to report every or most NCPA meeting. It is also possible to write memos. We have a mechanism for, I don't know if we call it a colleague's memo. The City Council calls it a colleague's memo. I think we've called it that too, but we certainly have a mechanism by which 1, 2, or 3 commissioners can prepare a memo, and that can then get distributed to the rest of the commission and the public. So I think subcommittees do a huge amount of work, and I think I think they should consider that part of their job is to share that, and I think there are opportunities to do it.
I'm delighted to share it. I'm just, as somebody who's a new commissioner, I'm just trying to be so careful to not violate the Brown Act that I'm just sort of, kind of going, well, am I allowed to do this or that, or what can I do or not do? So it certainly is in my wheelhouse to be able to write what I would think would be a cogent and concise report or a presentation about what I think some of the issues are that we discussed, and that I'd love to have that I'd love to share with you. And so if there's already a mechanism where we're allowed to do that, I'm not sure what the work plan does then incrementally that we can't do already. If there is a mechanism to do that, then I don't know what extra piece it does.
So we did agree to form subcommittees. We have subcommittees, and I think that I like the idea of structuring that a little bit more rigorously than we've otherwise had. So I think report outs periodically on each of the items we're doing is good. There are 2 things I'm worried about. One is I'm generally worried that staff, even in the sense that we have to ask for information, ends up having to spend time with us. And I believe it's for a good cause, and so I think with discretion that I'm supportive of that idea, knowing full well I think Jane and Val and others would probably scream bloody murder at us eventually if we started burdening the staff to the degree that they just couldn't really be fully responsive to the other tasks. The other one I'm worried about a little is that a situation I'm very, very familiar with, where a board has a number of subcommittees, committees to address a number of topics. and these are usually citizen volunteers, not too different from us. These committees tend to go adrift and not focus in what the board is after, and so there's a continual tussle between the committee and staff and the board in this particular instance about what are the things that the board is interested in. And so we do have a process, and we check in with the city council once a year in terms of making sure that our priorities line up with theirs. And so I'm thinking that would be good and would be very important for us, but it would once a year be enough. And I know that Councilmember Scharf does attend meetings too, and so that is a point of contact too. But I'm just wondering if there isn't some other way where we do it, a mid-course check-in with city council saying, hey, this is what we're working on. These are the products so far. Is there any one of these areas that you think deserves more attention than the other, or any of these of no interest to you, so we don't do a disservice to the city council?
Any other comments? Steve, you want to provide any feedback, anything you've heard?
Well, it seems to me that what we've heard, certainly falls short of the level of enthusiasm for the work plan concept that I had thought we might hear. While I'm not sure why, I'm also not sure that we want to proceed absent a stronger feeling of support from a majority of commissioners.
Does a work plan necessarily dictate subcommittees? It strikes me that it doesn't necessarily.
I don't think it does.
Right. So maybe I inadvertently created confusion by spending so much time talking about subcommittees. Let me see if I can step that back and clear up any confusion I might have created. The proposal here is something that is completely separate from and independent of subcommittees and has nothing to do with subcommittees. The idea is to have a single document that summarizes in one place the things that we and staff and city council have decided are particularly important, but are so complex that by their nature, they require sustained attention over an extended period of time, not something that we just deal with once and then it's gone. And so what I really imagined was that this was a sort of journalistic or notational device to help us keep track of those items and to remind us succinctly in one place what we're doing on each of them. The only reason I mentioned subcommittees at all is because I thought there might be confusion, because if an item's that important, it often also has a subcommittee attached to it. And in my discussion with utilities, leadership, and the city attorney, one of the things we discussed was, is it possible the subcommittees are adequate to address this need for focusing on important ideas? My feeling is that subcommittees and the work plan are addressing two pretty different aspects of what important projects take. Subcommittees provide a mechanism, as you all know, for UAC members and staff to do sort of long, hard, nitty-gritty hours of work on things like poring through every line in a capital equipment improvement plan. And the work plan concept, as I envision it, is something that just helps us to remember at a glance what we've decided elsewhere and separately is important and where we stand on it.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Judith, were you going to say something else or not?
Well, I just wanted to sort of speak to the issue of lack of enthusiasm. It's not a phrase that's meaningful to me. So when you say work plan, I just don't know what you mean by it. Okay, so maybe if I understood the scope of what you're asking for, then I'd be more enthusiastic. But if it's a way that, there are issues that I would love to be able to address or write about that we do not have a subcommittee for. And so if this gave me a structure to do that, then I'd be all for that.
So I don't believe this does. What I'm proposing here is another piece of paper, like our rolling calendar, that would be here at our place each month, that would look something like this document. It's a single piece of paper summarizing the status of really important items. I don't think we can use the work plan as a way of elevating items to that highest level of importance. We have a process for doing that, and I wouldn't want to circumvent or undermine the process in place. So I think your concern is an admirable one. I don't think the work plan is the way to solve that, because the work plan is intended more to reflect things that have already gotten to that highest level of importance through whatever processes we have on the UAC, rather than a way of skirting process to force something there.
So what I'd recommend on this is I'd recommend that we give it a shot and try it. And Steve, I understand your concern that, gee, maybe we shouldn't do it if there's not strong enthusiasm for everyone, but I don't see any downside to it, other than perhaps some work that is not fully appreciated. So I would recommend we try it over the next 3 months, and then step back and say, is this adding value? And if it is, we keep going, and if it's not, then we don't need to do it. If we do it, there's obviously some logic to the chair taking responsibility for this. I will tell you, at this particular moment, I am, like, in general, I am so slammed on work and so forth that I would rather not. And if you'd be willing to do it, Steve, that would be great for sort of a 3-month period, and then we reassess the whole thing. I'll start with you. Is that an acceptable course of action from your perspective?
So I think your proposal to have a trial period of time is a good one, particularly if the majority of the commissioners agree, and if it turns out the attorney and utilities leadership have no objection. I do like and want to underscore one thing you said. I think what you're proposing is that we'll do it for a period of time, like a few months, and then evaluate it. And I do think that given the lack of sort of strong enthusiasm, what we don't want to do is just enshrine this as something that we're going to do perpetually. I like this idea of agreeing that we're going to pause in a few months and evaluate. Do we want to fix it, kill it, or continue as is? Right. I think is a real healthy thing. As far as who owns it, I'm happy to do it. I'm also happy to have someone else do it or do it with me, but sure, I'm happy to do it.
But I'll just say I was equivocating in my own mind between 3 months and 6 months. In some ways, 6 months is a little bit better to give it. But, we can do it for 3 and then try it for another 3 if we're not certain at that point.
Well, one of the things that I like about it, it's in addition to the rolling calendar, it's a way to come up with topics that we think ought to be addressed or that we'd like to address. For example, the discussion earlier about the opt-out was something that the nature, the sort of thing that could come up for saying we'd like to have this on our work plan to discuss this at some point during the year.
Okay, sounds good. Why don't we do the following? I'm going to assume that Commissioner Eglash is going to take the lead on this. However, having said that, Commissioner Eglash very kindly and generously said that if anyone else would like to do so or help him, they should let him know because of Brown Act issues. I guess anyone who would like to should indicate now. Jessica, what were you going to say? You look like you had something to say.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I did want to jump in at the very end if there was a free moment.
Sounds good. So anyone? Yeah. Steve, it's all yours. And I think, any other comments on this?
I don't even know if we need a resolution.
I don't think we need a resolution on this. So with that, we'll turn it over to Ms. Mullen.
So, yeah, since this is sort of a discussion item, there's no formal action on this particular item, but what I did want to briefly mention is 2 quick things that arose for me when Commissioner Schwartz was speaking about wanting to be able to report out about what was going on in subcommittee and to be able to share those particular thoughts. The first thing I wanted to note is that, especially for new commissioners, if you ever have questions about, is this okay under the Brown Act? I think it's good to be nervous. I think it's good to be cautious because it is really important that we adhere to that. Our office is always available and willing to, provide guidance in that regard, scheme out particular ideas anyone may have. And also in the bylaws, Commissioner Eglash also mentioned, what council does, they do colleagues memos, but at the commission level, they're commissioner memos. And so I can point you to section 7.6 of the bylaws, which describes the commissioner memo process. And so there is kind of a way to sort of work that out that's already in our existing bylaws. And then the last area of the agenda that I would point out that already exists without having to add any new agenda items is reports from commissioner meetings and events, which sometimes can be a good catch-all if the commissioner meeting or event is a subcommittee meeting. So, but it's always great to coordinate with staff on any substantive items that you may have and legal questions related to the Brown Act. I just don't want this feeling to be that, you know, there's nothing you can say or do, you're completely bound. It's great to just start with asking questions.
Let me just close with one comment in response to Mr. Hoyle's comment earlier with respect to subcommittees. It is my view that subcommittees, we don't use them extensively, but they are very helpful. And the reason why they are is it is essentially impossible for the UAC as an entire group to delve into any one subject in greater depth than we can for 30 minutes or 45 minutes up here for two reasons, the number one of which is the Brown Act. We simply can't go and meet, you know, outside of a UAC meeting. The Brown Act prohibits that. Not to mention the logistical difficulty of trying to get this group of people together. So the ability to appoint a couple of 2 or 3 commissioners to delve into something and come back is very helpful. Okay, that's it for this item. Steve, thank you very much for your work on this, and we'll look forward to seeing how it goes. The next item is a selection of potential topics for discussion at future UAC, at a future UAC meeting. I'm going to make one recommendation now on that, and that is the solar thermal topic. Commissioner Valentine mentioned that. We have not looked at that in a long time. In general, solar thermal has been a dismal failure, frankly, in Palo Alto, and although it's quite successful in other countries, China, for example, my gut feeling it has to do with volumes of purchases and so on and so forth. And so I think it would be helpful to have it as a discussion item. And so, Jane, I'm going to look towards you on this, to have it agendized, no major staff presentation required, dredge out, you know, whatever the last memo was on solar thermal, circulated around, and then just, because we have at least 3 commissioners who were not on the UAC the last time solar thermal was discussed. So I think it would be helpful to just dig up whatever memo on why solar thermal, whatever the stats are, why it hasn't been successful, and just, you know, give a little bit of air to the issue, and maybe we need to take a look at it in some way. Now, in order to add an item to the agenda, Ms. Mullen, you remind me, do I need one other vote or 2? One other? I need one other member of the UAC. Is there any other member of the UAC? Okay, there's one other member. Okay. So, and our process on that, Jane, is I assume we add that to the to be scheduled portion of the rolling calendar, so solar thermal discussion item. But to be honest with you, again, under the theory of just kind of getting things done, if we can add it in November or December, I don't think any real staff work is required, and it's probably a 15 or 20-minute discussion.
It's probably more fun when it's colder.
Wait, what? Yes, there you go. And I'm sure Director Fong would agree that it's no problem to add one more item to the November-December agenda. Okay, Garth, what do you got for us?
So this may not amount to much of an agenda item, but it could be tacked on to another, perhaps the city's director's report next time. I noticed on page 10 of this report, there's quite a significant drop in gas supply. And there's a couple of reasons that are indicated in it. I know we can't discuss it here, but I just think that the thought that crossed my mind might be on the minds of staff too. Does that have a rate impact? Clearly, revenues are tied to distribution, not the gas commodity because it's a pass-through, but the gas distribution rates are pegged on a certain volume, and so now you have your volume that is significantly lower than forecast. And I was just wondering if there's possibly an update that has to be done around the financial impact of that lowered gas usage. So again, I don't think this qualifies as an agenda item. It could be just a report out item at the next meeting.
Just one comment on that. you know, that we do an annual financial forecast every year, and obviously that issue would be addressed there, including in the preliminary financial forecast, and that is on the rolling calendar, I believe.
So the only point would be, since this is a little far off from that point in time when you would do that, is there something midstream that's of any concern to the city? It's just simply, I don't want to get into debating the topic now, but if there's something that you're watching because there could be a revenue concern around the gas, it would be nice to know that you're watching it and here's where you are. So I don't know if I need a motion on that, or that can just simply say it can be a request to go into the director's report for next month.
I think it's just a request to go into the director's report. And Jane, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, there is some analysis that would have to take place. I can't guarantee that it would be ready by the next director's report. We clearly are aware of this. And we watch our reserve levels on a quarterly basis, as reported in the quarterly report.
I well understand why a member of the Water Commission would be sensitive to these sorts of issues. This may fall in the category of the staff does this work anyways, and on whatever calendar you're on, it gets reported. I don't know.
Jane, do you have any additional thoughts, feedback? Good? Okay. Anything else? Okay, next up is update and discussion on impacts of statewide drought on water and hydroelectric supplies.
So, Chair, I need to again excuse myself. My standard reason, I have to repeat that I have
the rest of the evening. We'll miss you.
Right, thank you.
Carla, thanks for hanging in with us.
Sure, no problem. I'll be quick. And just a minute ago, I remembered that you all had asked for color copies of the graphs, and I'm not sure if that happened this month. But I will apologize for not being on top of that if you did not get those and make a point. I'm sorry. I should have followed up to make sure that was happening, and I did not. Oh, I'm Carla Daly, Senior Resource Planner in Utilities. So, shoot, where's my down button? Oh, you don't have a mouse. Oh, there it goes. So I added a couple of graphs this month that I hope you find interesting. I certainly did. I lifted these from a San Francisco Public Utilities Commission presentation that the water managers of all the BOSCA agencies were the audience for. And this one is a Hetch Hetchy watershed 3-year rolling account of hottest and driest, temperature being on the y-axis and precipitation being on the horizontal axis.
And just so we're all reading this correctly, if I understand this correctly, what this is saying is this year, or I'm sorry, 2014 was 2.5 degrees hotter than average? Or average,
so it's a rolling,
so
it's a 3-year period, so that dot is 2012, 2013, and 2014 combined. Okay. But yeah, that's the hottest and driest 3-year period on record.
2.5 degrees hotter than Fahrenheit, by the way. Hotter than what? Hotter than average, median, or something or other? Who knows?
That's a good question.
Hotter than something. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was hot and dry is the point of this graph.
Got it.
Really hot and really dry. Like, it's such an outlier, it's pretty shocking.
It is.
This is the other graph this is a PUC graph as well that I just found really interesting and so wanted to share with you. And it speaks to this concept of El Nino and a lot of the media coverage around El Nino and what that means for us directly. In this graph, this is the Hetch Hetchy precipitation compared to El Nino years. And you can just see that sometimes a lot of precipitation happens at Hetch Hetchy in strong El Nino years, and sometimes it does not. So I guess it's just a message that, yeah, El Nino looks really strong for this year, but we really have no idea what that's going to translate to. Precipitation is the solid black line.
So in other words, just, again, I understand Mike's point here. So in other words, if I'm looking, for example, at it looks like 1992, I see a red dagger sticking, or actually even more so, 1997. No, let's stick with 92. 92, you got a red dagger sticking way up there. So I'm assuming that means that was a strong El Nino year, but rainfall was actually below average. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood what's going on
Yep.
here. Okay.
So this is just a quick update where we are with our meeting the state target. We're at 33.9% as of the end of September compared to our 24% state mandated reduction that began June 1st. This is also, I can't remember if I showed you this last month or not, but it's a relatively new graph that shows what we think our hypothetical trajectory toward our total savings needed for that 24% reduction, and we're doing fairly well compared to where we think we need to be on that graph, although still not wildly above it, but above target. And then the table that you see every month showing that we're still far below the carbon neutral rate impact ceiling for keeping our electric portfolio carbon neutral despite the drought. That's all I had for this evening.
Very much. Any comments or questions, folks? Yep.
I just want to say, before I came here this evening, I'm on the board of Family and Children's Services of Silicon Valley, and I went to a little event at one of the other board members' house, and they had an artificial lawn in their backyard that they've had for 2.5 years, and this thing was amazing looking. I mean, it was beautiful. It looked, I mean, I couldn't believe how gorgeous this thing looked. And I think we need to take a picture of their backyard and use this as a way of promoting. It was mind-boggling that just how spectacular this place looked. And so I will follow up after, because I think, you know, helping people have ideas about how to really, you know, things that they can do in a practical way that could make a substantial difference. That just struck me as one that was just wonderful, because there was a piece on the radio recently that was talking about how they were talking about Southern California, and how in Bel Air, that there were just like a few homes that really accounted for just such a huge amount of the water usage. And it just seems to me that anything we can do to help make it be possible that everybody can be in this together and working hard to do what we're doing together is a positive, in a positive way, in a voluntary, not a coercive way, would be very positive.
Okay. Anything else? Commissioner comments on anything at all? Okay, go ahead, Judith.
In the minutes, last time I had asked, just wait, I had it here, sitting here, waiting all this time, about how many people, I asked Mr. Harrington, how many people, if they had done any research about who didn't have access to internet and broadband, and so he thought it was 10%, so I went and did some research, and it turns out everybody in Palo Alto has access to broadband, and so if there's somebody else that can document that there is a gap, I would be very interested in seeing it, because I talked to the folks at the Fiber Internet Center, who's the large ISP in town, and there are plans. Maybe you don't get every single plan in every single neighborhood, but there's nobody in our city limits who can't get internet access, so, for the basic functions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, folks, that's it. We're adjourned. Next meeting is November 4th. Thanks to all of you for hanging in with us. Have a good night.